Hey, welcome back to Cheating Tales Lab. We've got a brand new story lined up for you today, and we're thrilled to have you here. We hope you enjoy it. Let's get started. Mike Thompson stood in his garage, methodically packing his fishing gear for the weekend trip. At 38, he still had the enthusiasm of a boy when it came to these outings with his high school buddies. 15 years as a postal worker had given him an appreciation for order, and it showed in the careful way he arranged his tackle box. He hummed contentedly, picking up his favorite fishing rod, a gleaming beauty Rachel had given him for their anniversary 3 years ago. The weight of it in his hands brought a smile to his face. It was moments like these, surrounded by the familiar scent of motor oil and grass clippings, that Mike felt truly at peace. The garage door was slightly ajar, letting in a warm breeze and, unknowingly to Mike, creating an unintended audio channel to the kitchen. As he reached for his cooler, Rachel's voice drifted clearly from the house. "He's gone for the weekend. You can come over for a wild night." Mike's hand froze on the cooler's handle. The words hung in the air, as tangible as the fishing lures scattered across his workbench. For a moment, he thought he must have misheard. Rachel, his wife of 12 years, couldn't possibly. But as the implications of what he'd heard sank in, Mike's mind began racing, connecting dots he'd subconsciously noticed but dismissed over the past few months. Rachel's new clothes, the late nights at work, her sudden interest in going to the gym. Each memory now took on a sinister new meaning. Mike forced himself to take a deep breath. His hand shook slightly as he continued packing, every movement now a conscious effort to appear normal. The fishing trip, which had been the focus of his excitement all week, now seemed like a distant, unimportant thing. With the car loaded, Mike steeled himself and entered the house. Rachel was in the kitchen, phone nowhere in sight, looking for all the world like the loving wife he'd always believed her to be. "All packed, honey?" she asked, smiling up at him. Mike nodded, forcing a smile of his own. "Yeah, just about. Just need to grab my toiletries." He leaned in to kiss her goodbye, and as their lips met, Mike tasted the lie. The familiar scent of her perfume now seemed cloying, suffocating. He pulled away, maintaining his facade with effort. "Have a great time," Rachel said, squeezing his arm affectionately. "I'll miss you." "I'll miss you too," Mike replied, the words feeling hollow in his mouth. "Love you." As he drove away, Mike watched Rachel in the rear-view mirror. She stood on the porch, waving, the perfect picture of a devoted wife. But even as he turned the corner, he saw her reaching for her phone again, no doubt to continue the conversation he'd interrupted. Mike's mind was in turmoil as he drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Instead of heading to the lake where his friends were waiting, he found himself pulling into a secluded spot with a clear view of their house. He put the car in park and sat back, his heart pounding. What was he doing? Part of him screamed to confront Rachel, to demand answers. Another part insisted this was all a misunderstanding, that there must be an innocent explanation. But the cold, logical part of his brain, the part that had made him an efficient postal worker for 15 years, knew better. So Mike waited, his fishing gear untouched in the back of the car, his eyes fixed on the house he'd called home for over a decade. The house where, at that very moment, his wife was preparing to betray him. Dusk fell over the neighborhood, casting long shadows across manicured lawns and cookie-cutter houses. Mike sat vigil in his car, his body stiff from hours of inactivity, his mind a whirlpool of emotions. He'd texted his friends, making up an excuse about a family emergency. They'd been disappointed but understanding. If only they knew the real emergency unfolding. At 8:43 p.m., a red sports car turned onto their street. Mike's stomach churned as he recognized it. Steve's car. Steve, Rachel's co-worker of 2 years. Steve, who'd been to their barbecues, who'd complimented Mike on his grilling skills. Steve, who was now confidently approaching the front door of Mike's house to sleep with Mike's wife. With shaking hands, Mike pulled out his phone and started recording. The porch light illuminated Steve's face clearly as Rachel opened the door, the two of them exchanging a brief hug before Steve disappeared inside. Mike zoomed in, making sure to capture every detail. He felt sick, but he kept recording. As the night wore on, Mike documented the telling dance of lights in the house. At 9:15 p.m., the living room lights dimmed. Mike imagined them sitting on the couch he and Rachel had picked out together, sharing a bottle of wine, laughing at inside jokes. At 9:30 p.m., the bedroom lights came on. Mike's heart clenched. That was their bedroom, where he and Rachel had spent countless nights talking, laughing, making love. Now, it was the scene of her betrayal. Throughout the night, the bathroom light flicked on and off periodically. Each time it did, it felt like a dagger to Mike's heart. He remained resolutely in his car, fighting waves of nausea and the overwhelming urge to storm into the house and confront them. At 11:52 p.m., movement in the backyard caught Mike's attention. His breath caught in his throat as he saw Rachel and Steve making their way to the hot tub. The hot tub Mike had installed as a surprise for their 10th anniversary. He zoomed in with his phone, his hands steady despite the turmoil in his heart, capturing damning evidence of their intimacy. As the night wore on, Mike battled exhaustion and conflicting emotions. Part of him wanted to close his eyes, to pretend this was all a bad dream, but he knew the importance of what he was doing. Each photo, each video was a piece of evidence, a shield against the lies he knew would come. At some point, despite his best efforts, Mike dozed off. He jolted awake at 5:17 a.m., momentarily disoriented. Then he saw Steve's furtive exit from the house, and reality came crashing back. Mike raised his phone, recording Steve's walk of shame back to his red sports car. As Steve drove away, Mike sat in his car, feeling hollow. The night's vigil had left him drained, both physically and emotionally. But as the first rays of sunlight began to peek over the horizon, a new emotion began to take root in Mike's heart. It wasn't just sadness or betrayal anymore. It was determination. Determination to protect himself, to seek justice, to take control of the situation Rachel had thrust upon him. With a deep breath, Mike started his car. He had a long drive ahead of him, both literally and figuratively. But for now, he had a fishing trip to fake and evidence to secure. Sunday evening found Mike pulling into his driveway, his fishing gear untouched, his mind a battleground of emotions. As he cut the engine, he saw Rachel come out onto the porch, a smile on her face that now seemed like a grotesque mask to Mike. "Hey, honey," she called, walking over to greet him with a hug. How was the trip? As Rachel's arms encircled him, Mike caught the faint scent of an unfamiliar cologne clinging to her skin. His stomach turned, but he managed to return the hug, forcing a tired smile. "It was good," he lied, the words tasting bitter on his tongue. "Caught a few nice ones. How about you? Have a quiet weekend?" Rachel nodded, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture Mike now recognized as a tell when she was lying. "Oh, just caught up on some reading, did a bit of cleaning. Nothing exciting." Mike listened as Rachel recounted her quiet weekend at home, each lie stoking the fire of his resolve. He nodded at appropriate intervals, asking the occasional question, all while cataloging the inconsistencies. There was a wine glass in the sink, though Rachel claimed she hadn't had a drink. The hot tub cover was slightly askew, despite Rachel insisting she hadn't used it. That night, as they lay in bed, Mike found himself unable to sleep. The weight of Rachel's betrayal pressed down on him, made all the more unbearable by her peaceful breathing beside him. In the dark, with only the soft glow of the alarm clock for company, Mike began to plan. He started a mental log of Rachel's activities, noting times, dates, and coincidences with Steve's schedule. Tomorrow, he'd start documenting everything. He'd need evidence, cold, hard facts that couldn't be denied or explained away. Over the next week, Mike threw himself into his plan with the same meticulous attention to detail that made him an excellent postal worker. He volunteered for overtime shifts, explaining to Rachel that it was for a special surprise. Her eyes had lit up at that, and Mike had to swallow back a surge of bitterness. If only she knew. In reality, Each extra hour worked went into a secret account Mike opened at a different bank. He knew he'd need resources for what was to come, and he wasn't about to let Rachel's betrayal leave him financially vulnerable as well. At home, Mike started paying more attention to their teenage daughter, Emma. He noticed her confusion at Rachel's frequent absences, the hurt in her eyes when her mother missed another soccer game. Mike's heart ached for Emma, caught in the crossfire of her mother's selfishness. He began building a stronger bond with Emma, helping with her homework, and really listening when she talked about her day. They started having dinner together on the nights Rachel was working late. And Mike found himself treasuring these moments of genuine connection amidst the turmoil of his crumbling marriage. All the while, Mike carefully maintained his routine, giving Rachel no reason to suspect he knew about her infidelity. He kissed her goodbye in the mornings, asked about her day in the evenings, even initiated sex occasionally to avoid raising suspicion. Each act felt like a betrayal of his own integrity, but Mike knew it was necessary. He was building a case, gathering evidence, preparing for the storm to come. In quiet moments, when the weight of his knowledge threatened to overwhelm him, Mike reminded himself of what was at stake. This wasn't just about him and Rachel anymore. It was about Emma, about their future, about justice. And so, despite the pain, despite the anger and betrayal churning inside him, Mike pressed on. He documented credit card statements, showing Rachel's unusual purchases, lingerie she never wore for him, expensive restaurants she never mentioned. He created a secure email account to communicate with a divorce lawyer, laying out his situation in clear, unemotional terms. Mike spent hours researching Pennsylvania divorce laws, understanding the impact of infidelity on settlements. He was determined to be prepared, to protect himself and Emma from the fallout of Rachel's actions. As the days turned into weeks, Mike's plan took shape. He was no longer just Mike Thompson, unsuspecting husband and devoted father. He was becoming something else, a man with a mission, a silent storm gathering strength, preparing to unleash justice on those who had wronged him. The calm before the storm was coming to an end. Soon, very soon, Rachel would learn the consequences of her actions, and Mike would be ready. Mike Thompson's life had become a carefully orchestrated performance. To the outside world, he was still the same dependable postal worker, loving husband and devoted father. But behind the facade, a storm was brewing. Over the next month, Mike transformed into a silent detective in his own home. He noted Rachel's patterns with the precision of a scientist observing a specimen. Late nights at work conveniently fell on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Girls' nights out suspiciously coincided with the evenings when Steve's wife, Sarah, had her book club meetings. Mike's hand shook slightly as he installed a hidden camera in their living room. The new digital photo frame seemed innocuous enough, a thoughtful gift for Rachel to display their family photos. She had no idea that it was capturing her betrayal in high definition. The first time Mike watched footage of Rachel and Steve together in his own home, he felt physically ill. There they were, laughing on the couch he and Rachel had picked out together, sharing wine from the glasses they'd received as a wedding gift. The evidence was undeniable. Each video clipped another nail in the coffin of his marriage. In a twist of fate that Mike found grimly ironic, he found himself befriending Sarah, Steve's wife. Under the pretense of planning a surprise anniversary party for Rachel, Mike reached out to the unsuspecting woman. "Steve talks about you all the time." Sarah gushed over coffee one afternoon. "He says you're the best thing that ever happened to him." Mike nodded, forcing a smile as guilt gnawed at his insides. He was about to shatter this woman's world, just as it had been shattered. But the alternative, letting her live in blissful ignorance while her husband made a fool of her, seemed even crueler. At home, Mike noticed the toll Rachel's deception was taking on their daughter, Emma. The teenager's confusion was palpable, her hurt evident in the slump of her shoulders and the furrow of her brow. "Mom's been working so hard lately," Emma mentioned offhandedly one evening as Mike helped her with her math homework. "I hardly see her anymore." Mike's heart clenched. He wanted to tell Emma the truth, to protect her from the pain that was coming. Instead, he simply nodded and changed the subject. Later that week, while tidying up Emma's room, Mike found a report card tucked away in a drawer. Rachel's signature was conspicuously absent, the form forgotten in her web of lies and distractions. Determined to be the stable presence Emma needed, Mike intensified his bonding efforts with his daughter. He attended every one of her soccer games, noting with a mixture of sadness and anger Rachel's frequent absences. They started a tradition of Sunday morning hikes, giving Mike precious insight into Emma's thoughts and feelings. During one such hike, as they paused to admire a particularly beautiful vista, Emma turned to Mike with a vulnerability that made her seem much younger than her 15 years. "Dad," she said hesitantly, "is everything okay with you and Mom?" Mike's heart raced. He wanted to spill everything, to unburden himself to his daughter. But he knew it wasn't fair to put that weight on her shoulders. "Not yet. We're just going through a bit of a rough patch, sweetie," he said, pulling her into a hug. "But I want you to know that no matter what happens, I'll always be here for you." As Emma nestled into his embrace, Mike felt a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for Emma, for her future, for her right to trust and believe in love. With careful deliberation, Mike reached out to Rachel's parents, Tom and Linda. Over a casual dinner, he expressed concern about Rachel's behavior, hinting at potential issues without revealing the full extent of his knowledge. "I'm probably overreacting," he said, watching their faces carefully. "But I thought you should know. Maybe you could keep an eye out at the anniversary party." Tom and Linda exchanged worried glances. Mike could see the seeds of doubt he'd planted taking root. He asked them not to confront Rachel, suggesting they observe for themselves at the upcoming celebration. They agreed, their concern for their daughter evident in their furrowed brows and quiet sighs. As the weeks passed, Mike consulted with his lawyer about custody options. He learned about Pennsylvania's preference for shared custody, but his lawyer assured him that his meticulous documentation of Rachel's behavior and his own involvement in Emma's life would work in his favor. Mike threw himself into subtly documenting his role as a father. He saved every receipt from school supply shopping trips, took countless photos at Emma's events, and kept a detailed log of the time he spent helping with homework and school projects. Each piece of evidence was another sandbag in the levee he was building to protect his and Emma's future. As Mike's case against Rachel grew stronger, so did the storm brewing on the horizon. The calm facade he presented to the world belied the tempest of emotions roiling beneath the surface. Soon, very soon, the gathering storm would break. And when it did, Mike would be ready. Mike stood in the kitchen, a calendar in his hand and a forced smile on his face. "I've been thinking," he said to Rachel, who was absently scrolling through her phone. "Our 15th anniversary is coming up. We should do something special." Rachel looked up, surprise evident in her eyes. "Oh, what did you have in mind?" "A party," Mike said, his voice brimming with an enthusiasm he didn't feel. "A big celebration with all our friends and family. We've been through so much together. We should mark the occasion properly." Rachel's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "That sounds nice. But isn't it a bit much? Maybe we could just have a quiet dinner, just the two of us." Mike shook his head, maintaining his cheerful facade. "Nonsense. 15 years is a big deal. We should celebrate with everyone we love." As Rachel reluctantly agreed, Mike could see the discomfort in her body language. It only fueled his determination. Over the next few weeks, Mike threw himself into party planning with suspicious enthusiasm. He booked a private room at the most upscale restaurant in town, a place known for its romantic ambience and exquisite cuisine. The irony wasn't lost on him. Invitations went out to family, friends, and co-workers, including Steve and Sarah. Mike took particular care with that invitation, making sure it was addressed to both of them, a subtle reminder of the vows Steve was betraying. "We have to invite your parents," Mike insisted when Rachel balked at the idea. "They'd be hurt if we left them out." Rachel's reluctance was palpable, but she couldn't argue without raising suspicion. Mike watched as she forced a smile and nodded, adding her parents to the guest list. As the party approached, Mike noticed Rachel becoming increasingly anxious. She made several secretive phone calls, her voice hushed and urgent. Mike recorded each one, adding them to his growing collection of evidence. "Maybe we should scale back the party," Rachel suggested one evening, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her blouse. "It just seems like a lot of fuss." Mike reached out and took her hand, suppressing a shudder at the contact. "Nonsense," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "You deserve to be celebrated properly." The week before the party, Mike executed the next phase of his plan. Using a secure, anonymous email account, he sent a carefully worded message to Rachel and Steve's HR department. The email hinted at an inappropriate workplace relationship, suggesting they check company communication logs and security camera footage. Mike knew the email would set off alarm bells. He imagined the HR team scrambling to investigate, the whispers that would start to circulate. It was the beginning of the end for Rachel and Steve's carefully constructed lie. 2 days before the party, Mike overheard Rachel arguing with Steve on the phone. He pressed his ear to the study door, his heart racing as he listened to their heated exchange. "We need to cool things off," Rachel was saying, her voice tight with worry. "People are starting to notice. The party this weekend, it's too risky." Steve's voice was muffled, but Mike could hear the resistance in his tone. "You're overreacting," Steve insisted. "No one suspects anything. We just need to act normal." As Rachel continued to argue, Mike silently retreated. A grim smile played on his lips. The cracks were beginning to show. The night before the party, Mike put the final touches on his presentation. The slideshow was a masterpiece of deception. Happy photos of their life together, carefully selected to showcase their seemingly perfect marriage. But hidden within the code was a devastating twist, ready to be unleashed at the touch of a button. As Rachel slept beside him, blissfully unaware of the storm about to break, Mike carefully placed copies of his evidence in envelopes. Each one was labeled with a name: Rachel's parents, Sarah, key friends and colleagues. Tomorrow, their world would shatter, and Mike would be the one holding the hammer. The private room at Le Chateau buzzed with excitement. Soft lighting cast a warm glow over the elegantly set tables, and the gentle clink of champagne glasses filled the air. To anyone looking in, it appeared to be nothing more than a joyous anniversary celebration. Rachel's parents, Tom and Linda, stood near the bar, their eyes fixed on their daughter. The concern Mike had planted weeks ago had clearly taken root, evident in the furrow of Tom's brow and the tight set of Linda's mouth. "She seems off, doesn't she?" Linda murmured to her husband, watching as Rachel laughed a little too loudly at something a co-worker said. Tom nodded, his frown deepening. Mike was right to be worried. Something's not right here. Across the room, Steve and Sarah arrived, their entrance causing a ripple of tension that only Mike seemed to notice. Steve's eyes darted around the room, pointedly avoiding Rachel. Sarah, oblivious to the undercurrents, beamed as she handed Mike a beautifully wrapped gift. 15 years, she said, her voice warm with genuine affection. "You and Rachel are such an inspiration." Mike accepted the gift with a gracious smile, tamping down the guilt that threatened to surface. Soon, very soon, Sarah's world would crumble. But Mike reminded himself that the truth, however painful, was better than living a lie. As the evening progressed, Mike played the perfect host. He circulated among the guests, charming and attentive, all while acutely aware of the storm about to break. He noticed a few of Rachel's co-workers huddled in a corner, their whispers no doubt about the recent HR investigations. The trap was closing in. Midway through dinner, Mike stood, gently tapping his glass with a spoon. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to him. Rachel looked up, a flicker of nervousness crossing her face before she masked it with a smile. "Friends, family," Mike began, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate 15 years of marriage with Rachel and me." He clicked a button on the remote in his hand, and the large screen behind him came to life. A slideshow began, showing happy moments from their years together, their wedding day, vacations, the day Emma was born. When I met Rachel, Mike continued, his eyes scanning the room, I thought I was the luckiest man alive. And for many years, I was sure of it. Rachel's eyes filled with tears, her smile wobbling. If Mike hadn't known better, he might have been fooled by her performance. But life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it? Mike's tone shifted, almost imperceptibly. Sometimes the surprises are wonderful, and sometimes... He clicked the remote again. The happy images on the screen suddenly gave way to something else entirely. Photos of Rachel and Steve together, screenshots of intimate text messages, video clips that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. The room fell silent, the kind of heavy, shocked silence that feels like a physical weight. Mike's calm voice cut through the tension like a knife. Sometimes, the surprises shatter everything we thought we knew. What happened next was chaos in slow motion. Rachel, her face drained of all color, tried to stand, to reach Mike, but her legs gave out. Her father, fury etched into every line of his face, blocked her path. Steve made a dash for the door, but found his way barred by Sarah, her expression a mixture of devastation and rage. "How could you?" she screamed, her voice raw with pain. Mike continued his narration, his voice steady as he laid out the extent of Rachel and Steve's betrayal. He played audio recordings of their conversations, displayed screenshots of their secret communications. With each new piece of evidence, the gravity of the situation seemed to press down harder on everyone in the room. As the final slide appeared, divorce papers already signed by Mike, the room erupted. Rachel's sobs were nearly drowned out by the angry voices of their friends and family. Some of Rachel's co-workers were already on their phones, no doubt calling HR to report what they'd seen. Mike raised his hands, calling for silence. Remarkably, the room quieted, all eyes turning to him once more. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice thick with emotion for the first time that night. "I'm sorry to Sarah and to Tom and Linda. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but I couldn't let this deception continue." He took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. "I'll be taking a leave of absence from work to focus on my daughter, Emma. I ask for your privacy and understanding in the coming weeks." As Mike made his way to the exit, he paused to hand envelopes to Rachel's parents and Sarah. "Everything you need to know is in here," he said quietly. "I'm truly sorry." The last thing Mike saw as he walked out of the restaurant was Rachel crumpling to the floor, her carefully constructed world shattering around her. He felt a moment of pity, quickly overwhelmed by a sense of justice served. As he stepped out into the cool night air, Mike took a deep breath. The storm had broken. The truth was out. Whatever came next, he was ready to face it head on. The morning after the anniversary party, Mike Thompson sat at his kitchen table, a cup of coffee growing cold before him. The house was quiet, almost unnaturally so, as if the very walls were holding their breath in anticipation of the storm to come. He didn't have to wait long. His phone buzzed incessantly, a barrage of messages and missed calls from Rachel. Mike ignored them all. He had said his piece last night. Now, it was time to weather the fallout. As the day wore on, reports began filtering in from friends and family. Rachel, it seemed, had launched a desperate smear campaign. She was telling anyone who would listen that Mike had been controlling and abusive throughout their marriage, that she had only sought comfort in Steve's arms because of Mike's cruelty. Mike listened to each account calmly, his face betraying no emotion. When the concerned callers finished, he would simply say, "I understand. I'll be sending you some information shortly." Then he would hang up and add another name to his list. By evening, Mike had emailed his meticulously gathered evidence to everyone in their inner circle. Text messages, photos, video clips, credit card statements, a mountain of irrefutable proof of Rachel's infidelity and lies. The next morning, Mike walked into the offices of Patricia Reeves. ESQ, the lawyer's reputation for ruthless efficiency, preceded her, and Mike had to dip into his overtime savings to afford her services. But as he laid out his case, showing Patricia the evidence he'd gathered, He knew it was worth every penny. "Mr. Thompson," Patricia said, leaning back in her chair with a predatory smile, "I think we have a very strong case here. Rachel won't know what hit her." Meanwhile, across town, Rachel sat in her own lawyer's office, her face pale and drawn. She had spent the morning trying to delete incriminating emails and texts, only to realize with growing horror that Mike must have copies of everything. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Thompson," her lawyer said, his voice grave as he reviewed the evidence Mike had sent over. "But I'm afraid you have no leverage here. The infidelity is established beyond doubt, and Mr. Thompson has documented everything meticulously. We're going to have to advise you to settle." Rachel's world continued to crumble around her. Her parents, disgusted by her behavior and lies, refused to support her financially or emotionally. Her calls went straight to voicemail. Her letters returned unopened. The comfortable life she had taken for granted was slipping through her fingers like sand. At home, Mike faced a different battle. Emma, devastated by the revelations about her mother, had retreated into herself. She refused to speak to either parent, locking herself in her room for hours on end. Mike focused on being a stable presence, maintaining their routines as much as possible. He left meals outside Emma's door, kept her favorite snacks stocked in the pantry, and continued to drive her to and from school in silence. After a week of this, Mike made a decision. He reached out to Dr. Samantha Carter, a therapist specializing in adolescent trauma. "Emma's hurting," Mike explained during their initial consultation. "And as much as I know I can't fix this for her. She needs professional help." Dr. Carter nodded sympathetically. "You're doing the right thing, Mr. Thompson. Bringing Emma in for therapy is a crucial step in helping her process this trauma." Gradually, with Dr. Carter's help, Emma began to open up. She started joining Mike for meals again, and even initiated conversations about mundane topics like school and her friends. Mike cherished these moments, seeing them as small victories in the long battle ahead. Through it all, Mike continued to document every interaction meticulously. He kept a detailed log of all the time he spent with Emma, saved receipts for all expenses related to her care and activities, and recorded any attempts by Rachel to contact or manipulate their daughter. As the divorce proceedings began in earnest, Mike's evidence painted a clear and damning picture. Rachel's infidelity was established beyond any doubt, and Mike's role as the primary caregiver became evident through his extensive documentation. In the courtroom, Patricia Reeves argued convincingly for Mike to receive primary custody of Emma. "Your Honor," she said, her voice ringing with conviction, "Mr. Thompson has been the stable, consistent presence in Emma's life. While Mrs. Thompson was engaged in her affair, Mr. Thompson was attending parent-teacher conferences, helping with homework, and providing the emotional support Emma needed. It's clear that Emma's best interests lie in remaining primarily with her father." As Mike listened to Patricia lay out their case, he felt a mix of sadness and vindication. This wasn't the future he had envisioned when he married Rachel 15 years ago, but he was determined to make the best of it for Emma's sake and his own. The battle had begun in earnest, and Mike was prepared to fight with everything he had. As weeks passed, the full consequences of Rachel's actions became increasingly apparent. The comfortable life she had known, the respect she had enjoyed in their social circle, all of it crumbled like a sandcastle at high tide. Rachel's parents, Tom and Linda, once doting and ever present in their lives, now refused to even speak to their daughter. Rachel's desperate calls went straight to voicemail. Her tear-stained letters returned unopened. The pain of their rejection was a constant, gnawing ache in Rachel's chest. One afternoon, Rachel stood at her parents' front door, hand poised to knock. She could hear movement inside, knew they were home, but as minutes ticked by and her knocks went unanswered, the harsh reality of her situation truly sank in. She had lost not just her husband and daughter, but her entire support system. Steve, the man for whom Rachel had risked everything, proved to be as unreliable as Mike had always suspected. Pressured by his own impending divorce and the scandal that now surrounded him, Steve cut all ties with Rachel. His last text message to her was brief and cruel. "This is too much. Don't contact me again. Rachel read and reread the message, tears blurring her vision. She had thrown away 15 years of marriage, had hurt her daughter deeply, all for a man who abandoned her at the first sign of trouble. The workplace investigation, triggered by Mike's anonymous tip, concluded with devastating results. Both Rachel and Steve were fired for violating company policies. The HR manager's words still rang in Rachel's ears. "Your behavior has brought disgrace to this company. We have no choice but to terminate your employment, effective immediately." In their small town, news traveled fast. The scandal of Rachel and Steve's affair, coupled with the dramatic revelation at the anniversary party, made finding new employment nearly impossible. Whispers followed Rachel wherever she went, sidelong glances, and abruptly ended conversations, making it clear that she was now a pariah in the community she had once called home. Rachel faced financial ruin, unable to maintain the lifestyle she had grown accustomed to. The house she had shared with Mike was now solely his, the joint bank accounts frozen. She found herself staying in a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, the peeling wallpaper and musty smell a constant reminder of how far she had fallen. Meanwhile, Mike's unwavering focus on being the stable parent was paying off. Emma, still deeply hurt but slowly healing, had chosen to live primarily with her father. The court had acknowledged Mike's consistent presence in Emma's life, impressed by the meticulous records he had kept of his involvement in her day-to-day activities. During one of their therapy sessions, Emma had finally opened up about her feelings. "I'm still so angry at Mom," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But Dad, he's been my rock through all of this. I don't know what I'd do without him." Dr. Carter nodded encouragingly. "It's okay to be angry, Emma. What your mother did has hurt you deeply. But it's good that you recognize your father's support. That stability is crucial for your healing process." The court's decision reflected this reality. Rachel's visitation rights were limited due to concerns about her stability. She was allowed supervised visits twice a month, a far cry from the daily presence she had once had in Emma's life. As the divorce neared finalization, Rachel made one last, desperate attempt to salvage what she had lost. Late one night, she appeared at Mike's door, her eyes red-rimmed and pleading. "Mike, please," she begged, her voice cracking with emotion. "I know I made a terrible mistake, but we can work through this, can't we? For Emma's sake, for the sake of our family." Mike listened calmly, his face impassive. The sight of Rachel, once so put together and confident, now broken and pleading, stirred a complex mix of emotions in him. But the trust that had been shattered could not be so easily repaired. "I'm sorry, Rachel," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. "But what's done is done. There's no going back. Instead of trying to fix what can't be fixed, I think you should focus on rebuilding your relationship with Emma. She needs her mother, even if things can't be the way they were before." As Rachel's shoulders slumped in defeat, Mike felt a weight lift from his own. He had faced the storm head-on and had come out stronger on the other side. In the quiet moments between the legal battles and emotional upheavals, Mike focused on helping Emma navigate the complex emotions of their new reality. They had honest conversations about trust, forgiveness, and consequences. "Emma," Mike said one evening as they sat on the porch swing, "I want you to know that it's okay to still love your mom. What she did was wrong, and it's okay to be angry about that. But she's still your mother, and it's okay to have a relationship with her if that's what you want." Emma leaned against her father's shoulder, drawing comfort from his steady presence. "I don't know if I can forgive her," she admitted softly. Mike wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Forgiveness is a journey, sweetheart. It doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't mean forgetting or excusing what happened. It's about finding peace for yourself." These conversations, difficult as they were, helped Emma begin to process her feelings. She started to see Mike not just as her father, but as someone of integrity and strength, a model for how to face adversity with grace and resilience. As the dust began to settle, Mike and Emma found themselves forging a new path forward, their bond stronger than ever in the face of the storm they had weathered together. The day the divorce was finalized felt almost anticlimactic after the months of turmoil. Mike sat in the courtroom, his face a mask of calm as the judge read out the terms. Beside him, Patricia Reeves allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. In the matter of Thompson versus Thompson, the judge intoned, the court rules as follows. Primary custody of the minor child, Emma Thompson, is awarded to the father, Michael Thompson. Rachel Thompson is granted supervised visitation twice monthly. Mike's heart swelled with a mixture of relief and sadness. This was the outcome he had fought for, but he took no joy in Emma losing full access to her mother. The judge continued, furthermore, Rachel Thompson is ordered to pay child support in the amount of $800 per month. Mike heard Rachel's sharp intake of breath from across the courtroom. He knew this would be a significant financial strain given her current unemployment, but he also knew that Emma deserved that support. Finally, the family home is awarded to Michael Thompson to provide stability for the minor child. As the gavel fell, marking the official end of their marriage, Mike felt a chapter of his life closing. He turned to shake Patricia's hand, murmuring his thanks for her expert handling of the case. Outside the courthouse, Mike paused on the steps, taking a deep breath of the crisp autumn air. He had emerged victorious, but the victory felt hollow. The true challenge lay ahead, building a new life for himself and Emma from the ashes of the old. In the weeks that followed, Mike threw himself into securing their future. He used his share of the divorce settlement wisely, first paying off the remaining mortgage on the house. As he signed the final payment, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. This house that had seen so much pain would now be a safe haven for him and Emma, free and clear. Next, he set up a college fund for Emma. Your future is important, he told her as he showed her the account statement. I want you to have every opportunity, no matter what. Emma's eyes had filled with tears, and she had hugged him tightly. These moments of connection, born from the shared pain they had endured, were precious to Mike. The rest of the settlement went into home improvements. Mike and Emma spent weekends painting walls, replacing old carpets with hardwood floors, and planting a small vegetable garden in the backyard. Each change, no matter how small, felt like a fresh start. At work, Mike's professionalism during the ordeal had not gone unnoticed. His supervisor called him into the office one afternoon, a rare occurrence that initially filled Mike with apprehension. Thompson, the supervisor said, leaning back in his chair, I've been impressed with how you've handled yourself these past months. Despite everything going on in your personal life, your work hasn't suffered. In fact, you've been one of our most reliable employees. Mike nodded, unsure where this was going. We've had a supervisory position open up, the supervisor continued. I'd like you to consider taking it. It comes with a pay raise, of course, and more flexible hours. Could be good for you and Emma. The promotion was unexpected but welcome. The flexible hours allowed Mike to be there for Emma in ways he couldn't before, attending her soccer games and school events without having to juggle his work schedule. More than that, Mike found satisfaction in mentoring younger postal workers. He saw a bit of his younger self in them and took pride in helping them navigate the ins and outs of the job. 2 years after the divorce, Mike heard through mutual friends about Rachel. She had moved to another state, starting over in a new city where her past was unknown. She had found entry-level work, slowly rebuilding her career from the ground up. Most surprisingly, Rachel was in therapy, working through the personal issues that had led to her infidelity. Mike felt a complex mix of emotions at this news, a lingering anger, yes, but also a glimmer of hope that Rachel was finally confronting her demons. Emma, now in college, had a complicated but improving relationship with her mother. They had bi-weekly phone calls, slowly rebuilding the trust that had been shattered. During school breaks, Emma would sometimes visit Rachel, their relationship evolving into a more adult dynamic. Despite his personal feelings about Rachel, Mike supported these interactions. He recognized Emma's need for both parents in her life, even if the family unit they had once known was gone forever. How was your visit with your mom? Mike would ask when Emma returned from these trips, keeping his tone neutral and supportive. Emma would usually shrug, a small smile playing on her lips. It was okay. Better than last time. We're working on it. As time passed, Mike found himself reflecting on the journey they had been through. One crisp autumn morning, as he and Emma prepared for a fishing trip, he realized something profound. He was happy. Not the naive, unquestioning happiness of his early marriage, but a deeper, hard-won contentment. He had emerged from the crucible of betrayal and divorce stronger, more confident in himself and his abilities. He had dated casually over the past couple of years, but found that his primary focus remained on his relationship with Emma and his own personal growth. As they drove to the lake, the same lake Mike had been headed to when he discovered Rachel's affair, he glanced at Emma in the passenger seat. She was no longer the hurt, confused teenager she had been during the divorce. She had grown into a strong, compassionate young woman, resilient in the face of adversity. They arrived at the lake just as the sun was peeking over the horizon, casting a golden glow across the calm water. Mike showed Emma how to bait her hook, his hand steady as he guided hers. "You know," he said as they cast their lines into the water, "I used to come here with my dad when I was about your age. He taught me everything I know about fishing." Emma smiled, a genuine, unguarded expression that warmed Mike's heart. "And now you're teaching me. It's like a family tradition." Mike nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "Yeah, it is. A new tradition for our new life." As they sat in comfortable silence, waiting for the fish to bite, Mike looked at his daughter. He saw the strong, compassionate young woman she was becoming, and felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought them here. The path had been difficult, fraught with pain and betrayal. But as the sun climbed higher in the sky, warming their faces and sparkling off the lake's surface, Mike knew that they had weathered the storm. They had emerged not unscathed, but stronger, wiser, and with a deep appreciation for the bond between them. In that moment, with his daughter by his side and the peaceful lake stretching out before them, Mike Thompson felt truly at peace. The silent storm had passed, and in its wake, a new day had dawned. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.